Tonight we walk into a city that seems to stand at the edge of human survival. In 1931, beneath the pale dust of southern Iraq, excavators working with the University of Pennsylvania entered the mound called Tel Ferrer. Their trenches opened through layers of collapsed mud brick, abandoned rooms, broken pottery, and tablets hardened by 5,000 years of silence. The ancient name of that mound was Shuruppak. In Sumerian tradition, it was not merely another settlement beside the river, it was the final city named in the sacred sequence of human cities, the city associated with the last ruler of an age destined to disappear beneath a devastating flood. Scholars from Oxford have translated the surviving Sumerian flood composition with careful restraint. The damaged tablet does not offer a complete account. Entire lines are missing. Yet what remains is quietly extraordinary. 5 cities appear as foundations of ordered human life. The final name is Shuruppak. Then, somewhere within the broken text, destruction approaches. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And perhaps, as the evening grows still around you, you might leave your location and your local time below. It is strangely comforting to imagine listeners gathered across the world. While one ancient city slowly rises from the dust, you find yourself standing on a flat plain under a sky bleached almost white. The air tastes faintly of clay and river reeds. Somewhere beyond the low horizon, a broad watercourse moves with deceptive patience, feeding fields of barley and carrying small boats loaded with baskets, jars, and bundles of cut grass. The houses around you are made from mud brick, warm beneath the sun, their walls softened by wind and countless seasons of repair. There is no marble here, no towering stone monuments, no golden palace glimmering like a promise. Shuruppak is built from earth, water, straw, labour, and faith. Its streets are narrow, its roofs are flat, its doorways open into shaded courtyards, where grain is counted, cloth is folded, and children hear the low murmur of adult worries. Yet this unassuming city carries a remarkable burden. According to the old tradition, humanity did not simply wander into cities through ordinary necessity. Settlement was part of a divine arrangement. Kingship descended, sacred authority took form, temples received offerings, fields were organized, human life, once scattered and uncertain, became measured by walls, canals, harvests, debts, duties, and names pressed into wet clay. The records confirm something simple and important. Shuruppak was a real city, occupied during the age when urban civilization was taking shape in southern Mesopotamia. Its ruins preserve thousands of tablets and seal impressions, the administrative fingerprints of people who stored grain, assigned labour, traded goods, and attempted the familiar human miracle of keeping accounts accurate. Even paradise needs paperwork, but the Sumerian imagination placed something else upon this city. It placed Shuruppak at the end of a sacred list. Eridu came first, ancient and revered, linked with watery wisdom and beginnings. Other cities followed, each granted a role within an emerging world. Then came Shuruppak, standing last in the sequence, almost like the final lamp lit before an approaching storm. You can almost hear the city breathing in the evening. A woman shakes dust from woven cloth. A donkey complains somewhere beyond a wall. Sandals scrape along packed earth. The scent of baked bread mixes with river mud and smoke from cooking fires. An official sits beside a tablet, pressing small signs into clay while another man recites numbers that must not be forgotten. Nobody appears to know they are living inside a remembered ending. That, perhaps, is what makes Shuruppak so haunting. In stories of catastrophe, people rarely look like characters waiting for catastrophe. They repair walls, they argue over grain, they worry about sick livestock and rising water levels. They fall asleep beneath reed mats while the wind moves softly against the house. A curious detail survives in the old king traditions. The rulers of the earlier cities are assigned reigns so enormous that no ordinary human lifetime could contain them. Thousands upon thousands of years gather around their names. Some readers have taken those impossible numbers as evidence of a lost civilization, or visitors from a distant world, or knowledge deliberately buried by later scribes. The tablets themselves offer no such certainty. To ancient scribes, enormous spans of rule may have signalled sacred time, a world closer to divine origins than ordinary history. A king who reigns impossibly long belongs not to a government archive, but to an age where memory has already become myth. Still, those numbers remain unsettling. They make the earlier cities feel less like settlements and more like stations along a fading cosmic map. Shrupak is the final station. Its most famous ruler in tradition is remembered as a man chosen to survive the flood. In one form of the account, he receives a warning through the careful secrecy of divine speech. The world of cities is in danger. Human noise, human disorder, or some greater offence has disturbed the powers controlling existence. The decision is made somewhere beyond ordinary hearing. A flood will come, yet in this first quiet moment, the flood remains unseen. You're still walking through Shrupak while its ovens remain warm. You're still tracing walls that were once bright with household activity. You notice the rough touch of sun-dried brick beneath your fingers. It crumbles slightly, as though the city is already trying to return to the soil from which it rose. When archaeologists dug here, they found evidence of inundation within the ancient levels of occupation. River flooding was not unusual across the southern plain. Rivers shifted channels, broke banks, buried fields, and remade entire neighborhoods. A terrible local flood could have left a memory deep enough to grow, generation by generation, into a story of almost universal destruction. Yet scholars continue to weigh the relationship between physical flood deposits and literary memory. Did one overwhelming event inspire the tale? Did repeated disasters merge into a single sacred warning? Or did a theological story later settle upon a landscape already marked by water? The earth answers softly and incompletely. For a moment, it feels as though you are watching two cities occupy the same ground. One is archaeological, filled with ceilings, jars, tablets, workshops, and human routines. The other is remembered in damaged lines, where humanity gathers in its final ordered city while an ending moves silently toward it. The mystery is not that Shrupak existed, it did. The mystery is why this city, among so many along the rivers, became the place where the old world was remembered as ending. Perhaps its people endured a flood so terrible that their descendants could never speak of it plainly. Perhaps its temple scribes guarded stories already ancient in their own day. Perhaps the city stood in the imagination as the final achievement of humanity. Orderly, clever, prosperous, and still unable to protect itself. You listen again to the river. It does not sound violent. It moves quietly beyond the reeds, catching the last amber light of evening. A small boat drifts past. Somewhere, a clay tablet is placed upon a shelf, its wet signs left to dry beneath the cooling air. A name has been pressed into the earth. Shrupak, the city of accounts, grain, temples, labour, and domestic lives. The final city in the sacred order. The city where one generation, according to the oldest surviving story, continues its ordinary life while the sky prepares to change. And beneath your feet, the dust holds its silence, as though it remembers water. The ground beneath your sandals is never entirely dry. Even beneath the fierce sun, the plain carries the hidden dampness of river country. That faint mineral coolness rising from channels, irrigation ditches, and reed-filled banks. Here, a city does not simply occupy the land. It negotiates with water every day of its existence. Shrupak stands in southern Mesopotamia, upon the broader low country shaped by the Euphrates River. The landscape is almost impossibly flat. A person walking away from the city sees no protective hill, no rocky cliff, no natural fortress lifting houses above danger. Instead, there are fields, canals, marsh plants, mud embankments, and open horizons shimmering beneath the heat. It is a strange place to place humanity's final generation, yet it is also the only sensible place. The river gives almost everything the city requires. It moistens fields where barley bends beneath the wind. It carries fish into baskets, reeds into workshops, and boats towards settlements scattered along the plain. It turns lifeless dust into bread. It provides clay for tablets, bricks, jars, ovens, toys, seals, and walls. Even the city's memory is shaped from river mud, pressed by human hands, then hardened into objects capable of surviving their makers. You move along a canal edged with cut reeds. A boatman kneels inside a narrow vessel, pushing gently against the mud with a long pole. His cargo is ordinary and essential baskets of grain, woven mats, perhaps jars sealed for storage. From the bank, a boy watches him pass, holding a bundle of reeds against one shoulder. Nearby, 2 women rinse vessels where the water moves slowly beneath floating leaves. The city feels open to the river because it must be open to the river. Closing itself away would mean hunger. Embracing the water means risk. That quiet contradiction rests at the centre of Shurupak's existence, and perhaps at the centre of its later reputation. A settlement fed by the river may also become a settlement exposed to its moods. Archaeological surveys show that the ancient mound was divided by an old canal bed, with habitations spread across raised and lower areas. Modern research has even identified traces of a harbour and quay, revealing a city designed around movement upon water. Boats did not arrive at the edge as occasional visitors. They entered the daily heartbeat of the place, bringing materials, messages, and strangers into the inhabited world. A harbour changes a city. Through it come wool, dates, grain, timber, stone, copper, rumours, ceremonies, and quarrels. Through it come officials carrying instructions that will sound important until the next set arrives. Through it come families searching for work, merchants searching for profit, and priests searching for the correct quantity of offerings. Because divine favour apparently also requires excellent inventory control. In the heat of late afternoon, you pass a storage building whose walls are thicker than those of ordinary homes. Inside, grain is gathered into controlled amounts, carefully guarded against moisture, theft, and hungry rodents. Clay ceilings close doors, containers, and bundles. The marks pressed upon them announce authority. Someone is trusted to release what others have produced. Records from the city preserve this practical world of administration. Shurupak becomes especially significant during the 3rd millennium before the Common Era, when its scribes recorded labour, goods, deliveries, and institutional activity. These are not poetic dreams. They are traces of a busy urban community, a city where food and work moved through organised hands. The sacred version of the city carries a quieter meaning. In the traditions attached to Shurupak, this settlement is not simply positioned beside a useful river. It occupies a final place within an ordered human world. Location matters because water matters. The city is set where abundance and vulnerability meet, where the river can sustain thousands of lives while reminding them that the land remains borrowed. You step into the shade of a courtyard. A shallow bowl of water has been placed near a doorway, its surface trembling when a breeze enters. There is the fragrance of stored barley and warm clay. From a neighbouring room comes the clicking sound of a loom. The walls preserve the day's heat, but a reed screen offers some relief, filtering the brightness into gentle bands. A household here does not think in grand prophecies. It thinks in measures. How many jars remain? How much grain must be delivered? Which canal needs clearing? Which child has taken the good cup outdoors again? Who will mend the roof when the seasonal weather returns? Ordinary existence fills the mind completely, leaving very little room for cosmic dread. One charming and slightly odd detail of Sumerian urban life is the importance of clay labels and sealings. An official could secure a storeroom door with wet clay and a carved seal, leaving a miniature image of authority upon the entrance. The gesture feels surprisingly familiar. Humanity has always loved the sentence, "This cupboard is official," and somebody will be annoyed if you open it. The city's religious identity also appears tied to nourishment and cultivated land. Shuruppak was associated with a goddess connected to grain and the living air, an appropriate guardian for a population dependent upon harvests and seasonal balance. You can imagine offerings brought into temple space: bread, beer, grain, oil, wool, and the hopeful attention of people who understand that a successful harvest is never entirely within human control. The temple rises without the overwhelming stone grandeur imagined in distant legends. Its authority comes from repetition. Offerings arrive, accounts are marked, ritual words are spoken, workers enter and leave. The sacred and practical are not separated by a clean wall. They mingle in storerooms, fields, canals, and kitchens, because survival itself carries religious weight here. Still, an open scholarly question remains. Was Shuruppak selected in the literary tradition because of a genuine historical prominence? Because of an especially powerful communal memory associated with water? Or because its location suited the symbolic design of the tale? The available evidence can illuminate the city's physical life, but it cannot enter the minds of the composers who gave that city its enduring place. Your path carries you toward the riverbank as daylight begins to soften. The sky turns the pale color of fired clay. Across the water, reeds shift in silver-green clusters. A fisherman lifts a net slowly, and shining drops return to the current one by one. Farther away, a cargo boat approaches the quay, its shape dark against the glowing channel. Here is the quiet truth of Shuruppak's location. Humanity's remembered final city is not placed in a wasteland, nor upon a lonely mountain, nor behind walls of invincible stone. It stands where civilization is most fertile, most organized, and most dependent. It stands amid water routes, grain fields, storehouses, boats, shrines, and homes. The city survives because the river allows it. The city remains vulnerable for exactly the same reason. As dust settles over the plain, small lamps begin to burn behind doorways. Their light flickers upon jars, baskets, and sleeping mats. The canal reflects narrow ribbons of fire. A night bird calls somewhere among the reeds, then disappears into the growing stillness. No wall separates abundance from danger here. Only embankments do that, and embankments are made by human hands. The river moves in darkness, close to every household, close to every field, close to the sacred center of the city. It carries boats, reeds, fish, clay, grain, and the uncertain future of everyone who depends upon its patient course. Shuruppak stands exactly where it must stand, at the meeting place of human order and uncontrollable water. A wooden latch lifts with a dry scrape, and cool shadow gathers around your hands. Inside the administrative quarter, the heat of the street gives way to a dim chamber. Reed baskets lean against plastered walls. Sealed jars rest in orderly rows. Near an open doorway, a scribe bends over damp clay, his stylus entering the surface with steady, practiced pressure. Each small mark fixes an obligation into permanence: grain owed, wool received, labor summoned, offerings assigned. Beyond the room lies a larger courtyard, where attendants cross quietly beneath awnings of woven reed. Here, authority has a physical presence. It is heard in footsteps approaching guarded doors. It is noticed in the lowering of voices. It is felt in the simple knowledge that one household in Shuruppak commands the service, tribute, and attention of many others. At the center of the city's sacred memory stands a king named Baratutu. He is not described through battlefield victories, jeweled weapons, or triumphant marches across conquered lands. His fame rests upon something far stranger. In the Sumerian king list, translated and studied through Oxford's corpus of ancient literature, Ubara-Tutu rules in Shuruppak for 18,600 years. His name appears at the very end of the sequence of rulers who govern the world of the earlier cities. Then the waters come. The number cannot describe an ordinary reign. No body, however honoured, survives across that impossible distance. Yet the exaggeration is meaningful. To the minds preserving this tradition, Ubara-Tutu belongs to a realm where royal authority is not merely political. It is immense, sacred, and almost outside human measurement. He does not simply sit upon a chair inside a mud-brick residence. He occupies the last throne of an entire age. You imagine the royal household stirring at dawn. Servants carry water in heavy jars. A kitchen worker grinds grain upon stone, shoulders rocking patiently with the effort. Officials collect sealed bundles and inspect their marks. A priest arrives with freshly washed hands, carrying ritual duties that matter as much as any shipment or field boundary. The ruler's life is surrounded by labour. His meals require hands. His temple gifts require hands. His walls, garments, boats, records, animals, beer, and bread all depend upon lives woven tightly into the city's structure. Kingship may descend from heaven in a sacred account, yet it must still be maintained by people whose backs ache at dusk and whose children grow hungry when harvests disappoint. That is where the image becomes quietly unsettling. The final generation does not appear as an army awaiting judgment. It is not portrayed as a crowd of monsters or rebels. These are bakers, fishermen, field workers, potters, weavers, scribes, brewers, temple dependents, and families carrying water through the heat. The city chosen for the last ruler contains ordinary human lives beneath extraordinary divine arrangements. Perhaps that is how endings usually arrive. A messenger crosses the courtyard carrying a clay tablet wrapped in cloth. He passes through a doorway where painted plaster has begun to crack near the base. Two officials speak in low tones about allocations from a storehouse. An elderly attendant pauses beneath a shade screen, allowing himself one hidden breath of relief. Royal order continues through hundreds of such moments. None grand enough for a hymn, all necessary for the city's rhythm. The ancient list makes one claim with striking calmness. Kingship moves from city to city as though authority itself possesses a destination. It settles in one place, departs, and appears elsewhere. Human rulers seem less like owners of power than temporary vessels receiving it. When kingship reaches Shuruppak, the movement stops upon the threshold of disaster. Ubara-Tutu is therefore more than the city's ruler. He is the final keeper of an inherited system. All the ceremonial weight of earlier sacred cities seems to collect around his name. The long chain of authority narrows into one residence, one court, one aging order, one last city listening to the river and watching the sky. A peculiar detail softens this solemn scene. Ancient royal tradition is not always as stiff as modern monuments suggest. Kings might be imagined alongside shepherds, craftsmen, temple personnel, and officials whose duties included very practical concerns. Even a ruler occupying mythical time would still require someone to account for the beer ration. Eternity, it seems, is easier to govern when refreshments are properly recorded. Yet the long reign invites stranger readings. Across modern fringe theories, Ubara-Tutu sometimes becomes a survivor of an advance vanished people, or a ruler whose lifespan hides secret knowledge about humanity's origins. The idea is tempting because the number feels deliberately impossible, like a locked door placed inside the text. But the surviving records do not reveal machines, hidden science, or an unknown species directing Shuruppak. They reveal the ancient habit of giving sacred beginnings a scale larger than ordinary life. Still, the question does not entirely disappear. Why should the last ruler be attached to this city? Why does the sequence of enormous reigns reach its final resting point here? Some historians read the king list as a later attempt to present political power as one continuous sacred inheritance. Others wonder whether Shuruppak already held an unusually strong flood tradition. making it an inevitable location for the world's final pre-disaster ruler. The tablets preserve the arrangement. They do not preserve the reason. In the royal precinct, evening gathers slowly. A lamp burns upon a shallow stand, feeding a small ribbon of smoke into the darkening room. The smell is oily and faintly sweet. Outside, the courtyard stones release their stored warmth. Officials have withdrawn, leaving only guards, servants, and those who must complete work while the household settles. You approach an inner doorway. Nothing about it seems supernatural. It is narrow, framed by brick, polished near the edge by repeated touch. Beyond it, perhaps, the king receives reports, grain quantities, disputes over fields, temple requests, boat arrivals, repairs to storehouses, matters that sound almost absurdly small beside 18,600 years of assigned rule. Yet a city is governed through small matters. Ubaratutu's people do not live inside a legend while they live. They inhabit schedules, appetites, fatigue, obligations, marriages, births, complaints, music, private humour, and whispered resentment. A worker receiving barley at sunset probably does not pause to consider that later generations will imagine his ruler standing at the final edge of human time. The palace does not announce that edge either. Its walls are earthen, its rooms are practical, its authority depends upon belief, storage, ceremony, and obedient hands. A king inhabits its centre, marked in tradition as the last monarch whose rule belongs entirely to the world still intact. He's remembered not because he defeats an enemy, nor because he builds an impossible monument, but because the order entrusted to him approaches a silence it cannot prevent. Outside, a servant extinguishes one lamp and carries another through the courtyard. The small flame moves gently in his hands, sheltered from the night air. For a few seconds, the light passes across the doorway of the king's chamber, then slips away. The last throne remains in darkness, and somewhere within the city's sleeping households, the final generation continues dreaming beneath the rule of a king whose enormous years are almost spent. The smell of warm wax smoke lingers in a room where no one speaks above murmur. You sit near a wall coated with pale plaster, while a small oil lamp trembles beside a clay tablet. The tablet is not an inventory of barley, nor a record of sheep delivered to a temple household. Its lines hold something more intimate. They preserve advice, passed from an aging figure to a son who must learn how to survive among other human beings. The voice belongs to Shurapak. Here, the city becomes a person as well as a place, in one of the oldest surviving wisdom compositions from Mesopotamia. Shurapak is presented as a wise father, descended from the ruler Ubaratutu, speaking patiently to his son, Ziusudra. His name carries the weight of the city itself, as though streets, storehouses, canals, and doorways have found a human mouth. His son listens. That name, Ziusudra, will matter deeply within the Sumerian imagination. Yet in this quiet tablet room, he is not surrounded by rushing waters or terrified crowds. He is a young man receiving counsel. He is being prepared for ordinary life, for neighbours, marriage, speech, property, hunger, temptation, anger, and the dangerous carelessness hidden inside daily choices. The words are practical because human weakness is practical. Do not steal. Do not move boundaries in fields. Do not speak recklessly in quarrels. Do not become entangled with another man's wife. Do not sit in judgment when anger has made you foolish. Do not let greed pull your hand toward what belongs to someone else. A household may fall from a single thoughtless act, and a city is merely thousands of households trying not to fall together. Oxford scholars preserving the translated composition recognize it as one of the earliest bodies of written wisdom in the world. Some copies belong to a very remote stage of Mesopotamian literacy, when writing was still closely tied to administration, schooling, and institutional power. Yet here, within carefully shaped signs, an ancient father worries about matters that remain painfully familiar. Apparently, civilization begins with irrigation, accounting, and advising younger people not to make disastrous romantic decisions. You hear the soft tap of a reed stylus against clay. A student copies a proverb, pauses, corrects an awkward sign, then begins again. His teacher watches with the grave patience of someone who has repeated the same lesson for years. Around them, the city continues outside the room. A cart rattles across packed ground. A dog barks near a courtyard gate. Somewhere, barley is being ground into flour. Wisdom does not descend in a burst of light. It is copied slowly. That is the quiet power of the text. The city associated with humanity's threatened ending is also connected with human instruction. It does not merely stand beneath the shadow of destruction. It teaches. It gathers the small rules by which people attempt to remain decent while sharing streets, fields, water, food, desire, and resentment. Perhaps this is what a last generation truly requires. Not secret weapons, not impossible buildings, not shining machines concealed beneath temple floors. It requires the ability to trust a neighbor, divide grain fairly, protect a household, restrain an angry tongue, and remember that private selfishness eventually becomes public ruin. Outside, a dry breeze drifts through an alley. It carries the scent of crushed reeds and dung fuel burning in a nearby oven. A woman measures barley into a vessel, leveling the surface with the side of her palm. A trader speaks too loudly beside a doorway, claiming his goods are finer than anyone else's, which is almost certainly what traders have always claimed. The instructions understand this world. They belong among disputes, promises, debts, family tensions, and the fragile honor of ordinary people. Their concerns are not distant from the city's mud walls. They rise directly from them. There is a peculiar charm in the advice. One warning cautions against purchasing a donkey that brays excessively. You can feel the weary experience behind it. Somewhere, at some deeply unfortunate moment, a respectable household must have discovered that a noisy animal is not simply livestock. It is a public announcement of poor judgment, repeated at dawn. Even ancient wisdom has room for neighborhood irritation. Yet beneath its practical humor lies a larger unease. Why is the sun receiving these counsels remembered as Ziusudra? In Sumerian flood tradition, that same figure becomes the man preserved when destruction overtakes human settlement. The wise father's speech begins to feel like more than parental guidance. It resembles an inheritance offered to someone who may carry human habits into an emptied world. The text itself must be handled gently. Scholars continue to debate how early the connection between these instructions and the flood hero truly became fixed. The oldest wisdom traditions may not have been composed as a deliberate prelude to catastrophe. The bond between father, son, city, and flood may have deepened as scribes arranged older memories into a more complete story of human origins. Still, the emotional shape remains difficult to ignore. A father speaks, a son receives his words, a city listens around them. You rise and step into a courtyard where evening has begun to gather. Clay jars stand against one wall, their rims sealed with cloth. A narrow drainage channel crosses the floor. Near the entrance, a child crouches over a lump of wet mud, pressing patterns into it with a piece of reed, imitating the scribes whose marks govern adult life. Someone calls him inside. He ignores the voice until it becomes firmer. Life is wonderfully stubborn. The generation living within Shurpak does not appear as merely doomed. Through the wisdom tradition, its people become custodians of conduct. They understand that a city survives through invisible choices made each morning. A farmer respects a boundary. A merchant refuses a false weight. A husband returns home without bringing chaos through the doorway. An official does not let his appetite consume another family's grain. Such advice feels modest beside the enormity of divine destruction. Yet perhaps modest things are exactly what destruction threatens most. The flood is frightening because it does not erase abstract civilization. It erases kitchens, jokes, quarrels, lessons, sleeping children, noisy donkeys, and fathers hoping their sons will behave sensibly in a complicated world. The tablet rests upon a low shelf as night enters the room. Its surface is small enough to hold in 2 hands. Its lines do not announce that humanity is perfect. They suggest the opposite. Human life requires correction, warning, patience, and memory. The people of Shurapak must be instructed because they are fallible. They are capable of kindness, and equally capable of spoiling everything through greed or foolishness. The city's deepest inheritance may therefore be neither royal power nor hidden treasure. It may be advice offered in a city standing upon wet earth, where every household depends upon restraint, cooperation, and the uncertain mercy of water. Advice given to a son whose name will become entangled with survival itself. The lamp burns lower now. The scribe lays down his stylus. In the darkness beyond the doorway, the city's roofs settle beneath the night air, and the words of a father remain quietly pressed into clay. A civilization has spoken to its child. A cool draught moves through the temple doorway, carrying the scent of grain dust and crushed herbs. You cross from the glare of the street into a space of controlled shadow. The floor is swept smooth. Reed baskets stand beneath plastered walls, each one filled with offerings measured by hands accustomed to caution. Small loaves cool upon a tray. A jar of beer rests near a low platform. Wool has been folded into a neat bundle, its pale fibres almost shining where a shaft of sunlight enters through the doorway. This is not a palace chamber. No ruler waits upon a raised seat. This is the house of Sud, the divine lady of Shurapak. To the people moving quietly around you, the city does not belong entirely to its residents, to its canals, granaries as workshops, families, and cultivated fields exist beneath the protection of a goddess. Her presence is not imagined as distant or decorative. She's the city's identity made sacred, the power believed to watch over its food, breath, fertility, and survival. In ancient records, Sud is closely bound to Shurapak. The name of the goddess and the name of the city appear with almost the same written signs, distinguished by the marks telling the reader whether the text means a divine being or a human settlement. To a scribe, the difference matters. To a worshipper bringing bread through the temple gate, perhaps the separation feels less certain. City and goddess breathe together. Specialists studying Mesopotamian religion have shown that Sud later becomes identified with Ninlil, the great divine wife of Enlil, whose authority touches rulership and the ordering of destinies. Yet within Shurapak, she first belongs to this landscape of canals and barley, where air passes gently across fields, and every harvest depends upon forces too large for human certainty. You hear a soft rustling near the offering room. A temple worker empties barley into a large vessel, lifting the basket carefully so none spills upon the floor. Another marks a quantity upon wet clay. A third checks the seal on a container of oil. Religion here is not an escape from practical life. It is practical life lifted into ritual meaning. A goddess must be honored with grain, because grain keeps people alive. The temple gathers what the land produces and gives part of its sacred direction. Farmers deliver portions of harvest. Shepherds provide wool and animals. Brewers prepare drink. Bakers shape loaves. Scribes ensure that offerings have names, numbers, and responsible households attached to them. Someone somewhere has probably argued that his delivery was larger than the tablet suggests. Heaven may be eternal, but temple administration remains wonderfully human. At the far wall, a small image catches lamplight. Its form is worn, its expression difficult to read. You cannot know whether it truly represents Sud, an attendant spirit, or a treasured offering left by a family long vanished. Yet its presence changes the room. It reminds you that the city is filled with unseen relationships. People do not merely work for grain and shelter. They work while hoping someone beyond themselves notices. A young mother enters with a child pressed against her shoulder. The child is sleepy, one hand tangled in the edge of her garment. She sets down a modest offering, perhaps flour, perhaps dates, perhaps a small loaf prepared in her courtyard. Her lips move quietly. She may be praying for health, for milk, for protection from fever, or simply for the strength to reach another harvest without misfortune entering her doorway. Her request will never be written into a royal inscription, yet it belongs to the city's deepest truth. Great traditions are built upon small fears. A divine protector matters because human life is tender, uncertain, and always exposed to loss. One failed canal, one infection, one ruined harvest, one dangerous childbirth, one dispute with an official, and the careful order of a household begins to weaken. Sud receives these anxieties in silence. The temple also carries a larger political weight. If the city belongs to its goddess, then authority within the city requires her favour. Officials administer offerings in her name. Rulers seek legitimacy beneath her protection. The city is not merely inhabited ground. It is sacred property, placed within an arrangement believed to have been established by powers older than any household living upon it. Records connected with later kings reveal that devotion to Sud did not vanish easily. Her worship retained importance long after Shurupak's greatest days, and one later ruler rebuilt a temple whose name evoked a magnificent bond between heaven and earth. This endurance suggests that the city's goddess remained meaningful, even when the city's worldly prominence had dimmed. Sacred memory can outlive streets. A slightly curious element appears in the divine household surrounding Sud. Ancient hymns describe attendants and doorkeepers serving her, much like servants within a noble residence. Divine beings require entrances, messengers, guards, and ceremonial order. The heavens, seen from Mesopotamia, resemble a vast court where even immortal authority apparently involves appointments, responsibilities, and someone making certain guests are received correctly. You can almost sympathize with the celestial doorkeeper. In the temple courtyard, a breeze stirs loose chaff near a storage jar. The movement is slight, almost invisible, but an elderly priest pauses as though noticing something meaningful. Air is never merely air in a place where the goddess herself is associated with the living atmosphere above the grain fields. A breath across the courtyard might feel like comfort. A sudden stillness might invite concern. The city's sacred character creates an uncomfortable question. Did Shurupak become important in the ancient story because it belonged to Sud, a goddess connected with divine order and nourishment? Or did later generations increase her significance because the city had already become famous within tales of humanity's vulnerable beginnings? Researchers continue to examine that relationship. Administrative tablets show worship in action, with offerings, names, and temple activity. Literary compositions place divine meaning around the city. Yet the precise path by which local devotion became enduring sacred memory remains open to interpretation. The temple provides evidence, but not confession. As evening arrives, worshippers begin to leave. Their footsteps become softer upon the cooling ground. A worker carries the remaining offerings into storage. The scribe sets his tablet aside where it will dry without being disturbed. Near the altar, a lamp gives off a steady glow, illuminating barley grains scattered like tiny golden stones across the floor. Outside, the fields are darkening beneath a violet sky. The grain moves in waves whenever the breeze crosses it. To the families of Shurupak, this movement is not a pretty landscape detail. It is life itself, bending gently beneath the unseen touch of the city's guardian. You stand beneath the temple threshold and listen. There is no voice from the shrine, no answer falls from the sky, only the familiar sounds of sandals, reed doors, quiet animals, and wind passing through cultivated fields. Still, the people have placed their trust here. They have given the city a divine heart, and name that heart Sud. Incense curls through the dim air, thin as a line drawn by an uncertain hand. A tablet rests beneath lamplight, its surface broken at the edges and scarred by missing passages. Yet the surviving signs preserve an astonishing vision. Humanity is not described as slowly gathering into settlements by accident, family by family, fence by fence. Instead, the cities appear as part of a sacred arrangement, laid out with deliberate care upon the earth. The creator goddess looks upon wandering humanity with concern. People are scattered across open country, following paths without permanent shelter, without temples, without the settled rhythm of cultivated fields. In the preserved account, she desires to draw them inward, to gather them into places where sacred rites and human order can take root together. You feel the open plain around those wandering figures. There are no streets beneath their feet, only dust and pressed grasses. Wind lifts loose sand from dry patches of ground. Families carry bundles, reed mats, tools, children, and vessels containing whatever grain remains. They move beneath an immense sky, searching for pasture, water, shade, and a place safe enough for sleep. Then comes the idea of the city, not simply walls, not simply houses. A city offers a fixed hearth, a granary, an altar, a canal cleared by many hands. It offers protection from isolation, though not always from one another. It offers measurement, ownership, obligation, and the reassuring difficulty of living near neighbours who borrow things without returning them. Within the ancient composition preserved and translated by scholars at Oxford, 5 cities are named in a solemn sequence. Their bricks are laid in pure places. Their names are announced. Each is entrusted to a divine guardian, as though the human landscape must be divided into sacred responsibilities. First comes Eridu, given to the lord of deep wisdom and freshwater power. In the southern imagination, Eridu belongs near beginnings, near the watery source from which order may rise. You picture its sanctuary shimmering above marshland, with reeds whispering around its approaches and fishermen turning their boats toward home. Then comes Bad Tabira, a city whose remembered name carries the sound of craft, metalled transformation, and divine possession. Fire flickers inside workshops. Hammers strike materials brought from distant country. The noise travels through lanes where artisans understand that human skill can change the shape of the world, one heated object at a time. The third city is Larag, entrusted to a divine protector whose presence suggests strength and cultivated power. Fields spread outward under bright sun. Canal workers cut mud from blocked channels. Storehouses gather what the land provides, while shrine attendants carry offerings through shaded courtyards. The fourth city is Zimber, placed under the blazing eye of the sun god. Here the sunlight feels sharper, more watchful. The divine guardian of justice crosses the sky above merchants, judges, travellers, and household disputes. Little can remain hidden forever beneath such light, though human beings make valiant attempts. Then comes the fifth city, Sharpeg. Its position is quietly extraordinary. It is not named as the oldest foundation. It does not begin the sacred pattern. It completes it. The line of cities moves toward it with measured purpose, like footsteps approaching the final room of a house whose occupants do not yet know what waits outside. The ancient account gives Shrupik to its divine patron, placing the city within the same holy design as all the others. Nothing in the surviving lines says that its inhabitants are inferior. Nothing announces that its streets have been built for punishment. It appears instead as the completion of civilization's sacred map, a city founded in purity, granted identity, and made part of the ordered world. That makes its destiny more troubling. Humanity is gathered from wandering life and given cities. People receive streets, temples, canals, kingship, and cultivated fields. Their scattered existence is transformed into community. Yet the final city in that gracious sequence becomes the one most intimately connected with the generation facing destruction. A gift becomes an enclosure. Your mind drifts through the ceremony of naming. Priests stand near newly laid brickwork. Water is poured in purification. Grain is scattered as a blessing. A foundation deposit is lowered into the earth, perhaps containing a token of divine ownership. Someone speaks the city's name aloud, and the sound seems to settle upon walls still smelling of wet clay. To name a city is to promise permanence. Families arrive with bundles and animals. Roof beams are placed across fresh rooms. Children race through alleys not yet hardened by years of sandals. Bakers light ovens. Potters turn clay into vessels. Officials establish measures. Temple workers arrange offerings. A place that did not exist in one generation begins claiming the hopes of the next. It is difficult to imagine those first residents believing they occupy a final station. They see possibility everywhere. The canal brings water. The fields yield grain. The shrine offers divine attention. The walls provide shade during the cruel brightness of noon. For people once moving through uncertain country, a settled doorway must feel almost miraculous. A quirky modern notion sometimes arises around these 5 cities. Certain fringe interpretations treat them as landing points, power stations, or markers of an ancient technical network hidden beneath religious language. It is an appealing picture for anyone who prefers mysterious machinery to temple offerings and muddy sandals. Yet the tablets speak in the language of divine ownership, ritual foundation, and social order, not concealed engines beneath the plain. Their mystery is quieter and perhaps deeper. Why does the sacred design end with Shuruppak? Was its final placement shaped by a remembered flood associated with the city? Did storytellers arrange the sequence so the city's disaster became the climax of humanity's first settled age? Or did an older religious tradition already view Shuruppak as the closing point of a perfect divine arrangement? Historians still examine how these traditions developed and merged. The evidence reveals a literary pattern, but not the moment when that pattern gained its final meaning. The lost lines offer no easy rescue. They remain absent, leaving only the feeling that something essential once stood between the foundation of cities and the judgment placed upon them. You stand at the edge of an imagined sacred map. Far away, Eridu near its waters. Bad Tibera glows with working fire. Larag watches cultivated fields. Zimbir catches the unwavering light of the sun. Shuruppak lies at the end of the sequence, quiet beside its river channels, receiving settlers who believe they have entered security. In the gathering dusk, the 5 cities seem like lamps placed across the land. 4 glow along the pathway. The 5th burns nearest the darkness. At midday, the city no longer whispers. The lanes fill with feet, animal calls, hand carts, bargaining voices, and the dull percussion of work. A mallet strikes wood beside a workshop. Pots knock together in a shaded courtyard. A brewer calls for more water. Children chase each other around a stack of reeds until an irritated aunt sends them elsewhere, where they immediately become someone else's problem. From a roof, you hear Shuruppak as a living thing. Its sound rises through the heat like dust. Canal crews shout while lifting mud from a blocked channel. Boatmen call to one another near the landing place. Grain is poured into vessels with a dry rushing hiss. Sheep can complain in narrow pens. Stone grinders turn steadily in domestic courtyards, producing flour and a rhythm that enters every household without permission. This is civilization succeeding. More grain means more storage. More storage means more officials. More people mean more ovens, tools, boats, marriages, births, arguments and songs, and requests delivered to sacred powers. The city swells with the very proof that its foundations have worked. People have been gathered, fed, counted, governed, and made productive within a landscape carefully altered by human labour. Yet ancient stories carry a peculiar discomfort with human abundance. In a later Mesopotamian flood account, preserved in the Akkadian story of Atrahasis, humanity multiplies until its clamour troubles the divine ruler Enlil. Human activity becomes impossible to ignore. Sleep escapes him. The sound of ordinary life is transformed into a cosmic disturbance, a pressure rising against the order of heaven. The older Sumerian flood tablet is more damaged and more cautious. Its surviving lines preserve the terrible decision that the seed of humanity is to be destroyed. The exact complaint has slipped away within broken clay. No careful reader can honestly place every later explanation directly into the missing space. Yet the nearby tradition offers a haunting possibility. Humanity may have become endangered not because it failed, but because it became too numerous, too busy, too audible. You stand near an irrigation ditch while workers clear purple-brown silt from its bed. Their shoulders shine beneath the sun. Each basket of mud lifted from the channel protects crops growing beyond the city. The effort is exhausting, repetitive, necessary, and remarkably noisy. Instructions are shouted. Tools strike earth. Mud splashes against bare legs. Laughter breaks out when one man loses his footing and emerges looking less like a dignified labourer than an offended swamp creature. Their work creates abundance. Water moves again through the channel, spreading into fields where barley waits beneath the glaring sky. The people have done what the ordered world requires of them. They have maintained the system. They have bent their bodies to the needs of fields, temples, households, and storehouses. What could be wrong with that? Perhaps the unease lies in the ancient relationship between gods and humans. In Mesopotamian tradition, human beings occupy a world shaped by divine authority. They feed temples through offerings. They cultivate land associated with divine estates. They maintain sacred houses, conduct rituals, and sustain the earthly reflection of a heavenly order. Humanity is useful because humanity works, but a population large enough to serve is also large enough to disturb. The thought arrives quietly, almost unfairly. A city may fulfill its assigned purpose so thoroughly that its success becomes threatening. Thousands of people gather within its limits. Their fires burn each night. Their animals consume fodder. Their canals reshape water. Their voices rise toward the sky from dawn until darkness. A divine world desiring service may not desire intimacy. In the marketplace, you pass jars of oil, baskets of onions, salted fish, lengths of wool, clay cups, and round loaves marked by careful fingers. Two women examine a fabric while a merchant praises its quality with the solemn exaggeration of a man attempting to turn ordinary wool into a royal miracle. Near them, a tired donkey releases a long, mournful cry, as though personally offering evidence against crowded urban life. The sound rolls through the street. You almost smile, then it fades. The quirky detail is that ancient complaints about noise can feel surprisingly modern. Anyone who has heard a neighbour moving furniture at an unreasonable hour understands the emotional seed of cosmic irritation. Yet here the annoyance expands beyond human scale. In the later literary imagination, the sounds of childbirth, farming, trade, laughter, construction, and animals are no longer merely inconvenient. They become a reason to silence an entire species. This is not a gentle idea. The city contains no visible crime large enough to match such a punishment. You see greed, no doubt, and petty cruelty, laziness, impatience, dishonest waits, proud officials, careless husbands, resentful brothers, and children who seem devoted to touching objects they have been told not to touch. But you also see tenderness. A father lifts his sleeping daughter from a doorway. An elderly woman receives bread from a neighbour. A young apprentice helps a limping dog reach a patch of shade. Humanity is difficult, not monstrous. In the sacred imagination, however, the divine assembly does not gather in the marketplace to hear explanations. It gathers beyond reach, in a realm hidden from those whose lives are being judged. Decisions there move downward with terrible simplicity. The people below continue measuring barley and mending reed fences, while powers above consider whether their noise has become intolerable. Scholars still discuss how the Sumerian and Akkadian traditions should be compared. One preserves Shurupak, Ziusudra, and the decision to destroy humanity in a severely broken composition. Another gives fuller expression to the problem of human clamour and multiplication. They share a family resemblance, but they are not identical witnesses, and the silence of missing lines cannot be filled with complete confidence. That uncertainty deepens the atmosphere. Perhaps the people are condemned for their sound. Perhaps the lost portion named another offence entirely. Perhaps the flood was remembered as divine judgment only because natural disaster feels less unbearable when given a reason, even a cruel one. A river does not explain itself. A story tries. The sun lowers slightly, though the heat remains trapped between walls. Workers emerge from the canal with baskets empty and bodies aching. Household fires are prepared. A musician tests a stringed instrument in a shaded room, finding a simple pattern of notes. The tune is gentle. It carries across the courtyard, joining the grindstones, animals, footsteps, and voices of people moving through their evening tasks. From within the city, the sound is comforting. It means bread is being prepared. It means children are safe nearby. It means labour has ended for some, and conversation begins. It means a settlement of mud, brick and reed has become a human home, filled with all the untidy noises that accompany belonging. Yet far above the roofs, the sky appears vast and empty. No one can tell whether the gods hear gratitude or disturbance. No one can know whether the voices rising from Shurpak sound like worship, or like an interruption that has continued too long. The city keeps breathing, and its breath has become loud enough for heaven to notice. A faint scratching sound reaches you through the silence of an interior courtyard. It is not the movement of mice among storage baskets. It is not a servant sweeping chaff from a threshold. The noise comes from the plastered wall beside you, as though someone on the other side has placed a hand against the bricks and chosen not to enter. The ruler of Shurpak stands alone near that wall. His garments are clean, but the air remains heavy with heat. Oil lamps have been lit early inside the shaded residence, each flame feeding a little smoke into the room. Outside, household servants continue their duties. Water jars are filled. Tablets are carried between offices. A guard suppresses a yawn near the gate. Inside this quiet space, a warning begins. The surviving Sumerian flood composition presents the moment with an almost dreamlike strangeness. Ziusudra is described as humble, obedient, and attentive to divine instruction. He stands beside a wall. A divine voice does not openly address the king as an honored recipient of revelation. Instead, the words are directed toward the wall itself. While the listening human receives what is meant for him, the wall becomes a veil. The voice tells the wall to listen carefully. It speaks of a flood sweeping over the inhabited world. It reveals that a decision has been made to destroy the seed of humankind. The decree has been sworn by the great divine assembly, bound beneath the authority of heaven and earth. Something irreversible has entered the world, yet almost nobody within the city can hear it. Oxford's translation of the surviving tablet preserves this extraordinary feature with caution. The text is damaged, its lines incomplete, and the instructions that follow have been partly lost. Still, the essential scene remains unmistakable. A human ruler receives knowledge of destruction through indirect divine speech, hidden inside the strange courtesy of addressing a wall. Why not speak plainly? You place your palm against the brickwork. It is cool where sunlight cannot reach it. Mud brick has no ears. Plaster has no memory of its own. Yet in this tradition, the wall shield's a dangerous act. A divine being wishes to preserve human life without openly defying the judgment of the divine council. The warning must travel sideways, through an object unable to repeat what it has heard. The arrangement feels solemn and faintly absurd. One can imagine the heavenly defense offered later. No human was warned directly. Naturally, a wall was informed. If a nearby king happened to possess excellent hearing and a strong interest in survival, that is surely an administrative inconvenience rather than rebellion. Even divine courts appear to appreciate careful wording. The voice behind the warning is commonly understood as Enki, the god associated with freshwater depths, wisdom, clever counsel, and an unusual sympathy for human continuance. His realm is not the violent river in flood, but the deep source of life beneath the earth, the hidden waters from which wells, canals, fertility, and cunning intelligence seem to emerge. Enki is not simple comfort. Wisdom rarely is. A protector who speaks indirectly may care for humanity. Yet he also understands the rules of divine power. He does not overturn the decree in public. He does not summon the people to revolt against heaven. He gives one listener a path through disaster, and leaves the larger decision standing like a shadow across every household in the city. You hear distant laughter outside the chamber. Someone has spilled water near the kitchen entrance. A servant protests while another person finds the accident much funnier than kindness permits. The laughter travels briefly across the courtyard, bright and ordinary, then vanishes beneath the quieter sounds of work. None of them stands beside the wall. The warning does not pass from door to door. No messenger runs toward the harbour, crying that families must gather supplies. No bell calls field workers home. The secret is entrusted to one man, perhaps because only one household can be prepared, perhaps because divine mercy has strict boundaries, perhaps because the tale wishes you to feel the unbearable isolation of knowledge. To know disaster is coming does not always grant power to stop it. Ziusudra listens without interruption. The tablet presents him as a devoted king, one who serves the divine world with humility and constant attention. He is not a swaggering hero discovering a clever escape. He is a man already disciplined by reverence, forced to hear that the order he serves has chosen to erase the people placed under his care. A king should protect his city. What can he do when the danger comes from the powers giving kingship its meaning? The question rests heavily within the room. Beyond the walls lie homes where meals are being prepared. Workers return from fields carrying tools across tired shoulders. Temple attendants arrange food and drink for divine recipients. Children ask questions that adults answer impatiently, then lovingly, then impatiently once again. These lives are still complete in themselves, yet the sacred decision has reduced them to a threatened seed, something to be removed from the earth unless preservation can be smuggled through the narrow passage of one warning. The human world continues believing it is stable, while divine speech quietly withdraws that stability from beneath its feet. A popular fringe interpretation takes this scene as evidence of coded instructions transmitted by advanced beings through technology disguised as religious language. Walls become communication devices, divine councils become remote authorities, and the warning becomes a technical message. The reading has a modern elegance, but the ancient tablet provides no machinery and no concealed apparatus. Its secrecy is literary, religious, and deeply human in its emotional effect. The wall matters because secrecy matters. Specialists still debate whether the wall scene originally belonged to the earlier shape of the tradition, or whether scribes refined it while combining older stories of divine judgment and exceptional survival. The damaged tablet cannot disclose every stage of its own creation. Its absences leave space for uncertainty, and uncertainty is sometimes the most faithful companion of ancient evidence. The lamp beside you flickers. For an instant the wall seems almost alive, its rough surface marked by tiny cracks and shallow handprints left during construction. A mason built it to divide rooms, support a roof, preserve shade, and offer privacy. He could never have known that within remembered time. A wall like this would stand between humanity and the knowledge of its approaching destruction. Ziusudra lowers his head. Perhaps he feels gratitude, perhaps terror, perhaps the cold realization that survival may demand silence while his city remains unaware. There is no celebration within the warning, no pleasure in secret selection, only a command concealed within a whisper, and a ruler whose obedience has become painfully difficult. Outside, Shurapak glows beneath evening light. Smoke rises from ovens. Reed doors close softly. Boats settle against their ropes near the water. The city appears peaceful because its inhabitants have not heard what its wall has heard. Within the dim room, the plaster holds no expression. It has received the judgment of the gods, and one human being has understood. Night has settled over the workshops, but a single courtyard remains quietly awake. Under a reed canopy, bundles of rushes lie stacked beside jars of dark bitumen. The air carries a thick mineral scent, sharp and oily against the softer smell of damp fibre. A lamp burns near the ground, turning every tool into a narrow shadow. Someone has gathered rope, baskets, wooden pegs, clay jars, and woven matting into careful groups. Nothing here looks royal. It looks like work. Ziusudra stands beside the materials with his hands resting against a low table. A ruler may command storehouses and receive temple officials, Yet this task requires something more private than ceremony. A vessel must come into being without inviting the attention of a city trained to notice unusual movement. Reeds must be collected, bitumen must be prepared, food must be stored, skilled hands must be used, but too many questions cannot be allowed to grow. A secret large enough to save life is difficult to hide. In the Sumerian flood composition, the tablet breaks painfully near the moment when practical instructions would matter most. The warning survives, the terrible decision survives, yet the details of the vessel appear only in fragments, lost where the clay has crumbled away. Another Mesopotamian account, preserved in the story of Atrahasis, describes a survivor ordered to dismantle his household and construct a boat sealed against water. The missing lines of Shurpak invite a quiet ache. You can see what the text no longer says. Workers enter the courtyard at odd hours, carrying reed bundles upon their shoulders. A carpenter studies measurements scratched into damp earth. A brewer delivers sealed jars and assumes some unusual ceremony is being planned. A boy sent with rope pauses too long near the entrance, hoping to discover why the royal household suddenly requires enough cordage to restrain an entire herd. An overseer gently sends him away. Across southern Mesopotamia, boats are familiar objects. People travel by river and canal because water routes bind settlements together more easily than difficult roads across soft ground. Small reed craft glide through marsh channels. Larger cargo boats carry grain, wool, pottery, timber, and animals, bitumen, gathered from natural sources and traded into the southern plain. Seals hulls against leaking water. The materials of deliverance are therefore ordinary. That fact changes everything. Survival does not arrive as a shining object falling from the heavens. It begins with reeds cut by labourers, cord pulled tight by scarred fingers, and black sealant warmed until it can be spread across a hull. The vessel is sacred in purpose, yet stubbornly practical in construction. You kneel beside a worker twisting rope from plant fibre. His hands move with patient speed, twist, pull, tighten, lay the finished length upon the ground. He does not know whether his rope will hold baskets, beams, animals, or a door against rising water. He knows only that the household has ordered strong cord, and that weak cord earns complaints. Another man heats bitumen in a vessel above a controlled fire. The substance softens slowly, becoming glossy and unpleasantly fragrant. Smoke catches in your throat. When the thick black coating is brushed over woven reed surfaces, it closes gaps that water would otherwise discover within moments. Water has endless patience for weaknesses. A vessel intended to survive an overwhelming flood must become a floating household, a moving storehouse, almost a little city removed from streets and planted upon uncertain currents. It must carry drinking water, grain, dried food, seed, tools, woven coverings, lamps, ropes, containers, and living creatures requiring space, calm, and food of their own. One animal in a boat is a responsibility. Several animals become an opinionated community. You hear the rustle of sheep shifting within a nearby enclosure. A goat pushes its head between wooden slats, examining the courtyard with the confident suspicion that every human arrangement should include something edible. A servant tries to move it back. The goat refuses with the quiet authority of a creature that has never respected divine planning or household rank. Even in a fearful preparation, life remains stubbornly comic. The choice of what enters the vessel carries a deeper meaning. A human survivor alone would preserve only breath. A household with tools, animals, seed grain, food stores, and ritual knowledge preserves the possibility of settled life. The goal is not merely that one man wakes upon dry ground. The goal is that fields may be planted, bread baked, offerings made, animals tended, and human order shaped again from mud and memory. This is where the city reveals its true value. Its storehouses have gathered grain, its workshops have preserved techniques, its canals have supported livestock and crops, its scribes have learned to measure supplies, Its temple households have maintained rites that tell people how to speak with the divine world. Everything needed inside the vessel has been produced by the civilization now placed in danger. The threatened city supplies the means of its own survival. Yet another problem presses upon Ziusudra. How does a ruler gather provisions without revealing what he knows? Perhaps he claims a long voyage is planned. Perhaps he speaks of an offering shipment, an unusual royal storehouse, or repairs to a large cargo craft. Perhaps his attendants obey without explanation, because authority often trains people to treat mystery as routine. Scholars remain uncertain about the precise form of the Sumerian vessel and the wording of its lost instructions. The damaged composition does not grant a clear blueprint. Comparisons with related traditions can suggest shared ideas, but no missing tablet line should be confidently replaced by imagination. The surviving silence must remain part of the story. That silence surrounds the courtyard now. A worker lays reeds in overlapping layers. Another binds them into firm, curved bundles. Bitumen glistens beneath lamplight like liquid darkness. Jars are counted, shifted, sealed, and counted again. A woman responsible for provisions tests the lid of a grain vessel, frowns, and demands a better fastening. She has no intention of allowing valuable barley to spill because someone believed a loose knot would be sufficient. Perhaps she understands more than she says. Near the wall, a stack of seed grain has been separated from food intended for immediate use. These small kernels seem almost weightless when poured into a hand, yet within them rests the future shape of a field, then a harvest, then bread, beer, offerings, children, disputes, and the noisy return of human settlement. A whole world sleeps inside dry grain. The work continues beneath stars invisible from the roofed courtyard. There are no shouted commands, no public ceremonies, no announcement that a vessel is becoming the narrow boundary between continuation and silence. Only hands move through darkness, doing what hands have always done when faced with forces too large to control. They build. The vessel takes shape gradually, reed by reed, rope by rope, sealed beneath the bitter scent of bitumen. Around it, Shurpak rests beneath a calm sky, unaware that its craftsmanship, animals, harvest, and household knowledge are being gathered into one hidden chamber of survival. A lamp sputters beside the unfinished hull. Ziusudra looks upon it without triumph. The boat is not an escape from the city. It is the city reduced to what can float. The first warning is not thunder, it is the smell of the river. At dawn, you stand near the landing place while a sour, wet odour rises from water turned strangely thick. The current is carrying torn reeds, floating branches, dead leaves, and dark clumps of earth loosened somewhere beyond sight. Boatmen watch the surface with narrowed eyes. They have known this river since childhood, and they understand when its ordinary restlessness has changed into something heavier. A man reaches down with a pole and tests the current. The pole jerks in his hands. Along the quay, ropes are tightened around mooring posts. Cargo waiting for transport is carried away from the lowest platforms. Potters lift jars to higher shelves. A fisherman who usually complains about prices says almost nothing. His gaze remains fixed upon the water, where small circular eddies spin briefly, then vanish into the muddy flow. The river has begun speaking differently. Above the flat horizon, clouds assemble in a low grey wall. Such darkness feels unnatural after weeks of blinding light. The sun remains present, but its brightness has thinned behind layers of moving vapour. Birds cross the sky in uneven lines, calling sharply as they turn away from open water. Among the reeds, animals stir with the quick nervousness humans often notice too late. Within the concealed vessel, jars stand secured against movement. Grain, dried provisions, tools, seed, woven coverings, and water containers are fastened in close order. The available space has become precious. Every object brought aboard must justify its weight. Every loose lid, weak rope, and careless bundle can become dangerous when water lifts the floor beneath human feet. Ziusudra moves through the narrow interior without ceremony. His fingers test knots. His eyes rest upon sealed containers. His voice remains controlled while instructions pass between attendants. Bring the final water jars. Close the animal partitions. Secure the lamp oil. Remove anything unnecessary. The ruler's authority is narrowed into the practical language of survival, where hesitation is more dangerous than wounded pride. Outside, rumours begin moving faster than carts. A field worker reports that water is spread across a low barley plot. A canal keeper insists the embankment will hold, though he repeats himself too often. A household near the outer edge of the settlement carries sleeping mats onto its roof, believing height may offer protection if the streets become wet. Children sense adult fear and become unusually quiet, which is perhaps the most disturbing sign of all. The first drops arrive before midday. They strike clay walls with soft, dark marks. A few people glance upward almost gratefully, welcoming relief from the heat. Rain may nourish fields, clear dust from roofs, and fill shallow basins left beside doorways. But the drops grow larger, colder, and more frequent. Soon the sound upon reed coverings becomes a steady tapping, then a hard drumming that erases individual voices. Rain is no longer visiting, it is taking possession. The ancient Sumerian composition states that windstorms and gales rise together, and the flood sweeps across the land. The surviving tablet offers no leisurely account of people deciding what to do. Disaster enters as a joined force, wind and water acting with one purpose. The calm plain, built upon canals and cultivated fields, becomes exposed before a power no brick wall can persuade to stop. Scholars at the University of Pennsylvania noted an ancient flood deposit at Telfara, the mound identified with Shurapak. That layer cannot prove every detail of a sacred narrative, nor can it establish a single universal catastrophe. Yet it preserves an unsettling physical reminder. This city truly knew water powerful enough to leave its mark inside the earth. You feel that force arriving now. A gust bends the reeds almost flat beside the quay. Rain lashes across the harbour in silver threads, turning the familiar landing place into a blurred confusion of water and running figures. A boat breaks loose from one post, swings violently, then slams against another vessel with a crack loud enough to make everyone nearby turn. A woman cries out for her brother. No answer reaches her through the rain. Temple attendants hurry through flooded courtyards, lifting offerings and sacred objects from low rooms. Grain sacks are pulled onto platforms. A jar falls, shattering beneath rushing feet, spilling its contents into mud that immediately begins to dissolve into brown water. An official tries to shout instructions while protecting a tablet beneath his garment, determined that accounts should survive even when the city itself has stopped cooperating. It is an admirable instinct. It is also painfully human. Within the animal enclosure, fear becomes noise. Sheep crowd together, their bodies pressing against wooden barriers. Birds beat against woven cages. A goat that resisted every sensible instruction now enters the vessel with unexpected enthusiasm, deciding that obedience is attractive once the weather becomes unreasonable. A servant pulls the barrier closed and stares outward, breathing hard. The water has reached his ankles. Rain streams from roofs into lanes already filling from overflowing channels. Mud brick walls begin drinking the flood at their foundations. Their lower courses darken, soften, and lose the crisp lines maintained through years of plaster and repair. A house made from river earth can shelter generations from sunlight, wind, and ordinary storms. Against endless water, earth remembers what it is. At the city's edge, men struggle upon an embankment with baskets of mud and reed matting. Their labour is desperate, magnificent, and almost certainly insufficient. Each breach releases a violent rush into cultivated ground. Barley disappears beneath swirling brown sheets. Narrow boundaries between fields vanish. Water does not recognize ownership marks, temple allotments, family claims, or the angry speeches of supervisors. One fringe reading imagines Shurupak destroyed by an ancient engineered weapon, its flood language concealing a deliberate technological strike. The thought reflects a modern hunger for hidden mechanisms beneath old stories. Yet the landscape requires no such machinery. A low alluvial plain, dependent upon rivers and vulnerable embankments, already contains the means for astonishing destruction. The deeper mystery is not how water could destroy, it is why memory chose this destruction as the boundary of an age. A scholarly uncertainty remains within the mud itself. Flood deposits at settlements across Mesopotamia don't all belong to one identical moment. Different cities endured different inundations over long stretches of time. The sacred tale may preserve one overwhelming event at Shurupak, several disasters joined together, or a theological memory shaped from recurring terror on a dangerous plain. For those standing in the rain, such distinctions do not matter. The water is rising now. Ziusudra reaches the vessel entrance as wind drives rain across his face. Behind him, attendants bring the final bundles aboard. A man attempts to return for a missing container, but another catches his arm and pulls him inside. There is no time for one more useful jar, one more blanket, one more object suddenly made precious because it may be lost. Across the city, lamps vanish behind curtains of rain. The temple roof disappears first into grey distance. Then the storehouses blur. The harbour becomes only moving water and broken posts. People run through lanes that no longer lead anywhere secure. A door bangs repeatedly in the wind until the sound is swallowed by thunder. The opening of the vessel is closed. Darkness gathers inside, close and breathing, filled with animals, grain, frightened people, wet rope, bitter bitumen, and the unbearable knowledge of a city outside. Then the hull shifts, not greatly at first, only a slight movement beneath your feet, a rising sensation so gentle that it could almost be imagined. Another surge comes, stronger this time, lifting the vessel away from the ground that shaped it. Shurupak has become water, and the last safe floor is floating. Inside the vessel, darkness has a texture. It presses gently against your face, warm with animal breath, damp clothing, sealed grain, lamp smoke, and the bitter coating of bitumen. The floor no longer belongs to earth. It tilts beneath your feet, rises without warning, then settles with a groan of bound reeds and strained rope. Outside, the storm has removed distance. There is no market lane, no harbour post, no temple courtyard, no barley field stretching beneath light. There is only the thunderous striking of water against the hull, followed by the heavy rushing sound of the vessel sliding down another unseen slope. People sit close together because there is nowhere else to sit. A child has buried her face against her mother's shoulder. An attendant holds a jar between both knees, guarding it from every sudden movement. Near the animal partitions, a man murmurs continuously to frightened sheep, using the same quiet sound again and again. The animals do not understand words, but they recognize a voice refusing to abandon them. Ziusudra remains awake. His position offers no comfort here. Royal garments cannot steady a rocking vessel. Sacred ancestry cannot quiet a terrified goat, stop water seeping through a weak seam, or explain to grieving people why they have been spared when others have vanished into the storm. He moves carefully between supplies, touching walls, checking lashings, listening. A boat speaks when it is under strain. Reeds creak. Wood complains. Rope tightens with small dry snaps. Sealed surfaces sigh beneath repeated blows of water. Every unfamiliar noise causes a head to lift in darkness, because a single failure could open the flood inside their remaining shelter. A lamp is shielded within a clay niche. Its flame burns low, barely bright enough to reveal faces. Light is precious, but fire is dangerous. Oil must be measured. Air must remain breathable. Hands must move cautiously among packed containers and restless bodies. The vessel is alive with restraint. There are no open doorways now, no cool walk toward the canal, no stepping outside to clear the mind when fear grows too close. Survival requires people to endure one another's breath, grief, sickness, prayers, and unspoken questions within a chamber held above destruction by woven plants and dark sealant. The Sumerian tablet preserved through Oxford's translation gives the storm a measured duration. Waves and windstorms rock the great boat for 7 days and 7 nights. That simple count carries enormous weight. The flood is not a single violent moment. It is a world of repeated darkness, where each passing interval requires endurance without proof that endurance will matter. 1 day can be endured through urgency. 7 nights require something deeper. You begin to feel time changing inside the vessel. At first, people measure it by tasks. Secure the jars, calm the animals, distribute water, inspect the bindings, wipe moisture from the sleeping place. Later, time loses its familiar shape. Meals arrive without appetite. Sleep comes in short collapses, broken by violent movement. Wakefulness returns with the same rain, the same darkness, the same trembling hull. Someone tries to remember a household song. The first words emerge softly, almost swallowed by wind. Another voice joins, uncertain but grateful. The melody has no power over the flood. It cannot return streets, repair walls, or summon dry ground. Yet it places something human inside the noise, a small pattern chosen freely against the chaos outside. The child lifts her head. For a brief while she listens. At another hour, perhaps on the 2nd night, perhaps the 5th, a jar slips loose from its binding. It rolls across the floor with a terrible hollow sound. 2 attendants catch it before it breaks. Their relief comes out as laughter, sudden and inappropriate, because fear sometimes escapes in peculiar disguises. Nobody scolds them. A goat answers with a rude sound from its enclosure, apparently satisfied that the vessel's standards of dignity remain suitably low. This small absurdity matters. Life has not become entirely solemn merely because the world is terrifying. People still bump elbows, misplace tools, argue over portions, and discover that animals consider carefully arranged storage an invitation to create disorder. Even inside sacred survival, humanity remains familiar to itself. Yet no one forgets what may lie beneath the water. A woman sits with her hands folded over a bundle of cloth. Inside it, perhaps, is a household object she refused to leave behind. A small cup, a seal, a spindle weight, a figurine once placed beside a sleeping mat. The object has no great value within a royal storehouse, but it contains a room, a voice, a doorway, and the shape of a life no vessel can fully carry. Sirsudra notices her holding it. He does not ask her to surrender it. A ruler chosen to preserve life must also preserve grief, because survival without memory would be another kind of loss. The vessel carries seed for fields, animals for herds, tools for work, and people for generations still unseen. It also carries silence for those who remain absent. Rain beats overhead. The Sumerian story does not linger over every family in the storm. Its damaged lines move with sacred economy, giving you the flood, the great boat, and the measured days of violent water. But imagination enters naturally where clay is silent. A city cannot disappear without leaving human absence inside those who remember it. Some modern fringe readers treat the 7 days as an encoded cycle, perhaps astronomical, perhaps connected to hidden calculations inherited from an unknown age. 7 is indeed a powerful number within later traditions, and patterns invite speculation. Yet the ancient composition does not provide a secret calendar of destruction. Its number may simply give terror a shape the human mind can bear. A disaster without measure feels endless. A disaster counted by days can be remembered. Scholars continue to consider whether this 7-day storm preserves a distant memory of an exceptional regional flood, or whether the duration belongs mainly to literary design. Ancient stories often transform catastrophe into ordered time, creating a beginning, an ordeal, and a release. The tablet may carry both the echo of real water and the deliberate rhythm of sacred storytelling. Inside the hull, such questions have no place. There is only the next surge. The vessel climbs, leans sharply, and drops. Containers knock against woven supports. Animals cry out. Someone reaches instinctively for another person's hand, finding fingers already waiting. The lamp flickers, nearly fails, then steadies again inside its niche. The storm continues through the unseen night. Later, the sound changes. At first, you cannot be certain. Your ears have adjusted to violence so completely that quiet seems like a trick. Yet the pounding against the hull is less constant. The wind still moves, but its voice has weakened. The vessel rises and falls more gently, drifting rather than being hurled. No one celebrates. Everyone listens. A sheep gives a low complaint. Water drips somewhere within the dark interior. A tired man draws one slow breath, then another. Near the sealed opening, Ziusudra stands motionless, his face lifted toward a world he cannot yet see. 7 days have carried the vessel across the death of familiar ground. 7 nights have hidden every answer. Now the great boat rocks upon broad, uneasy water surrounded by a silence more frightening than the storm itself. For sound had concealed imagination. Quiet allows the mind to ask what remains beneath it. The lamp glows faintly. The survivors wait in darkness, while outside, a drowned horizon holds its breath. A narrow blade of light appears along the sealed opening. At first, it is almost painful to look upon. Your eyes have belonged to darkness for so long that even a thin line of brightness feels sharp and intrusive. Dust floats through it. Moisture shines along the woven wall. Faces turn slowly toward the pale opening, each expression marked by weariness, fear, and the cautious refusal to hope too quickly. Ziusudra reaches for the fastening. His hands move carefully, because the world outside has become unknown. Rope loosens, a reed covering shifts. Cold air enters the vessel with a clean scent of water, wet fibre, and distant mud. It is the freshest breath anyone inside has received since the hull lifted into the storm. The opening widens, light pours inward, people close their eyes against it. A child makes a small sound, neither laughter nor crying, simply astonishment escaping through tired breath. Animals stir behind their partitions, sensing air and brightness. Even the goat falls briefly silent, possibly overwhelmed by the discovery that the universe has resumed providing things to inspect. Outside of the waters extend beneath a whitening sky. There are no rooftops breaking the surface nearby, no canal banks, no temple platform rising through the water, no cluster of familiar date palms marking the entrance to a household courtyard. The plain has become a broad, shimmering expanse touched by ripples and floating debris, without streets or boundaries. A doorbeam drifts past. Its plaster is washed away. Reed matting clings to one end, turning softly in the current. Farther out, a pottery jar rocks upon the water, survives one gentle wave, then sinks without ceremony. Such objects have escaped houses only to become lonely witnesses upon an emptied surface. You breathe, but relief will not come easily. In the Sumerian account, light returns through the presence of Utu, the sun god, whose rays enter the great boat. Ziusudra opens an opening in the vessel, and the brightness of the sun reaches inside. The scene is brief upon the tablet, yet it carries the tenderness of a world receiving morning again. Sunlight is no longer ordinary. It falls across wet rope and exhausted faces like a blessing no one expected to feel. It touches the jars of seed grain secured within the vessel. It warms the back of a sheep standing uncertainly among human survivors. It makes every drop of water sparkle, as though beauty has returned without asking whether it has the right. This is the cruelty of calm landscapes. They can become beautiful too soon. The vessel moves gently upon the broad water. There is no violent lifting now, only a soft rocking that causes hanging ropes to creak. Attendants inspect the interior by daylight. They discover damp bedding, cracked containers, spilled feed, bruised limbs, and one section of binding stretched nearly to failure. Hands touch it with disbelief. One more hard blow might have opened the shelter to the water. Someone whispers a prayer. No one asks for elegance. Gratitude is clumsy when exhaustion has emptied the body. A woman simply presses her forehead against the vessel wall. A man removes his sandals and lets his bare feet touch the wet floor, as though confirming that he remains among the living. A child reaches toward the open light, trying to catch the drifting dust. Ziusudra turns toward the supplies. Among the stored provisions are creatures not intended only for rebuilding herds. In the religious world of ancient Mesopotamia, survival creates obligation. A person rescued by divine intervention cannot merely step into daylight and resume practical duties. Breath itself has become a debt. The first response must be recognition, offered through ritual. When a stable surface can be found, an offering must be prepared. The vessel edges near a raised patch of emerging ground. Dark with saturated earth, it may be a natural rise, a bank exposed as waters settle, or a place the story leaves deliberately indistinct. There is no welcoming gate, no crowd, no official to receive the ruler, only mud, pooled water, flattened reeds, and the soft slap of retreating currents. A rope is cast out. Feet step down cautiously. The mud accepts weight with a deep sucking sound. One attendant nearly loses a sandal and retrieves it with a look of offended dignity. The moment is oddly reassuring. A world in which footwear still behaves inconveniently is a world beginning to resemble life again. Ziusudra descends last. For several breaths he does not move. Wet ground clings to his feet. Wind touches his face. Above him, the sun passes through broken cloud, turning the surface of the water into sheets of pale metal. He has emerged carrying lives, seed, tools, and sacred responsibility, yet his first sight of dry land does not make him master of anything. He kneels. The offering is arranged with solemn hands. Fire must be coaxed into being from carefully protected materials. Dry fuel has become precious, more valuable than fine cloth or decorative stone. A flame finally catches beneath a small prepared place, trembling against the wet emptiness. Smoke rises slowly into the bright air. The Sumerian poem states that Ziusudra sacrifices an ox and a sheep. To modern ears, the act may feel strange, because surviving animals seem too precious to surrender. Yet within his world, the offering is not wasteful display. It is a formal acknowledgement that life continues beneath divine power, not beyond it. The smoke climbs. Its scent reaches the people beside the vessel, mingling with river mud and wet reeds. No temple walls frame this ritual. No polished court gathers around it. The entire flooded landscape has become a sacred enclosure, and the altar is little more than a fragile fire upon soaked earth. You watch the king lower his head. He has no speech capable of filling the horizon. Words would sound small beside so much absence. Perhaps he gives thanks for those breathing beside him. Perhaps he asks forgiveness for surviving. Perhaps he offers the smoke because ritual is the only shape his grief knows how to take. In later retellings of flood survival, birds are released to search for land, each flight testing whether the world has become habitable. The surviving Sumerian composition places its emphasis elsewhere, upon sunlight, reverence, and offering. This difference matters quietly. Ziusudra does not enter the renewed world as an explorer proving his cleverness. He enters it bowed beneath divine attention. A fringe imagination sometimes reads the sun entering the boat as a coded awakening from an enclosed preservation chamber, with the ritual afterward disguising contact between survivors and advanced overseers. It is an inventive thought, shaped by modern fascination with hidden technology. The ancient lines themselves remain simpler and more troubling. A man sees light, worships, and gives what he can to the powers who spared him. Scholars continue to ask how much of this ritual reflects established worship practices and how much belongs to the literary meaning of renewal. An offering following rescue is entirely fitting within Mesopotamian religion, yet its placement within this tale also transforms survival into submission. Humanity does not emerge independent. It returns beneath the same divine order capable of almost ending it. The fire burns steadily now. Behind you, the vessel rests against the mud, crowded with living creatures and exhausted people. Ahead lies no clear city, no measured field, no marked canal, no secure storehouse. Only wet ground waits beneath a widening sky, carrying whatever future can be coaxed from it. The smoke rises into sunlight. Ziusudra remains kneeling until the offering's complete, while those beside him stand quietly upon the first ground their feet have trusted. The world is visible again. It does not yet feel forgiven. Wet earth clings to your sandals while the smoke of the offering thins in the morning air. The remaining water stretches across the plain in silent pools, each one reflecting a sky newly cleared of anger. Broken reeds collect along the muddy edges. A fish moves briefly through water lying where grain once grew, then disappears beneath a surface brightened by sunlight. The landscape seems unfamiliar, though it is made from the same clay that once supported walls, courtyards, ovens, shrines, and counting rooms. Ziusudra remains upon his knees. His clothing has dried unevenly beneath the sun. Mud darkens the lower hem. Smoke passes across his bowed head, carrying the smell of sacrifice into a world where no familiar temple stands to receive it. Those gathered nearby remain quiet because the ritual is larger than gratitude. It is the first attempt to speak within a world emptied of ordinary answers. Then the divine presence turns toward him. In the surviving Sumerian account, the great gods An and Enlil appear within the concluding movement of the story. These are not minor household protectors, and embodies the high authority of heaven. Enlil carries the commanding power associated with wind, rule, and the decrees shaping the human world. The same divine order connected with destruction now confronts the man who has survived it. Ziusudra does not rise proudly. He lowers himself again. This gesture matters. He has carried living creatures through the flood. He has preserved seed, tools, breath, and human possibility. Yet he does not stand as a triumphant rival to divine judgment. He appears as a servant who has endured what no servant should have been required to endure, and who still understands that his life remains within powers greater than his own. The gods grant him life enduring beyond ordinary human measure. The old lines speak of eternal breath, of a life resembling that of the gods. Such a gift sounds magnificent until you allow yourself to feel its loneliness. Ziusudra has survived his streets, his households, his familiar voices, his place of rule, and the ordinary world that gave his name meaning. Length of life cannot restore a vanished doorway. Immortality cannot summon a drowned conversation back into the afternoon. A reward may also be exile. The divine decision does not place him again within Shuruppak. He's taken to dwell in Dilmun, described as the place where the sun rises. This destination glows strangely within Mesopotamian literature. It can appear as a pure and distant land, linked with brightness, freshness, trade, and the horizon where daylight begins its journey across the world. Your eyes follow that eastern brightness. Beyond the flooded plain lies the great watery route leading toward the lower gulf. Boats once travelled those channels carrying grain, textiles, timber, stone, copper, shells, dates, and messages between communities separated by marsh, river, and sea. To southern Mesopotamian minds, lands across those waters could seem distant yet connected, foreign yet essential. Touched by riches unavailable in the flat clay country of the cities, the historical identity of Dilmun is not entirely missed. Archaeological discoveries and inscribed records have strongly connected its later commercial centre with Bahrain and parts of the neighbouring Arabian Gulf coast. From the 3rd millennium before the Common Era, Dilmun became known as a vital partner within exchange networks, linking Mesopotamia with lands farther east. Ships moved through its world, carrying materials desired by temples, households, and rulers. Yet the Dilmun of Ziusudra is also more than a trading station. It is a place of separation. Imagine the vessel prepared once more, though no storm now forces its departure. Supplies are arranged with slower hands. Animals are led toward safer ground, uneasy beneath the open air. Seed jars are carried carefully, each one holding the patient promise of cultivation. Survivors glance toward Ziusudra, waiting for instruction, hoping a king may provide the direction that grief has taken from them. But his own destination lies elsewhere. Perhaps he watches the horizon while a small craft is made ready. Perhaps the divine removal occurs within sacred imagination, without oars, ropes, or a human crew. The tablet does not supply the comfortable details a modern mind desires. It gives the destination and allows the distance to remain luminous, unexplained, and quietly severe. He is preserved, then placed apart. The city connected with the final generation does not rise again around him in the poem. No line describes its houses restored upon dried mud, its temple swept clean, its harbour crowded with arriving boats. Shurupak remains the remembered city of the threatened world, while Ziusudra belongs to a new existence beyond the ordinary reach of his former people. This difference is easy to miss. A flood survivor often seems like the founder of everything continuing afterward. Yet the Sumerian tale leaves Ziusudra at a sacred distance. Humanity may continue, cities may return, fields may be measured again, and kingship may descend into new hands. The rescued ruler himself is removed from common history, almost as though the one man who knows too much cannot be permitted to live among ordinary generations. That thought has encouraged a curious fringe interpretation. Some imagine Dilmun as a hidden sanctuary where the knowledge of an earlier civilization was guarded from later humanity. In that reading, Ziusudra does not merely receive eternal life. He becomes keeper of secrets withheld from cities rebuilding upon the plain. The tablets do not say this. They offer something gentler and more troubling. They suggest that the survivor enters a realm touched by divine favour, while everyone else must rebuild without possessing his full experience. A man may carry memory beyond disaster, yet memory carried too far away can no longer guide the hands raising walls from mud. There is a scholarly debate hidden within Dilmun's sunrise glow. Did the poet intend a recognizable Gulfland transformed through religious imagination, or an ideal, sacred region merely associated with the East? The two possibilities may not exclude each other. Ancient people could know a real destination through trade, sailors, imported goods, and distant rumours, while also clothing that destination in the light of myth. A harbour can be both practical and enchanted. You stand beside shallow water while the sun climbs. The mud has begun drying into curled plates along the shore. A survivor places seed grain upon a cloth to inspect it for dampness. Another repairs a damaged basket with reeds gathered from the flood's debris. A woman washes a small household cup, rubbing river silt from its surface until a familiar pattern appears again beneath her fingers. Human life returns through small gestures. At the water's edge, Ziusudra looks toward a brightness his city cannot follow. There is no celebration upon his face. He has gained what rulers everywhere desire, a name that will outlast walls, a life touched by the divine, a dwelling set beyond ordinary decline. Yet he has lost the one place where he was simply known as a man among his people. The sun rises higher, its light spreads across pools, broken timbers, reeds, mud, and the quiet survivors bending over their tasks. Far from this damaged ground waits Dilmun, whether island, coast, sacred horizon, or all of these woven together within remembrance. Ziusudra has been spared from death, but Shurupak has not been returned to him. At the edge of the mound, wind brushes loose sand across a scatter of broken pottery. The river is no longer where memory places it. Channels have wandered, silt has gathered, fields have altered their boundaries, and the living settlements of modern people rise beneath a different arrangement of paths and water. Yet the mound remains, low and weathered against the plain, carrying within it the compacted rooms of a city once called Shurupak. You climb slowly, underfoot. Pieces of clay catch the light, some plain, some marked by the curved edge of a vessel shaped thousands of years ago. A fragment once belonged to a jar holding barley, oil, beer, or water, carried through a household doorway. Now it lies exposed to the open sky, no longer useful, yet still refusing complete disappearance. This is how an ancient city survives, not through a single perfect monument, towering above all doubt. It survives as foundations hidden beneath earth, as seal impressions, storage rooms, tablets, animal bones, pottery, flood-borne deposits, and fragments of names recovered from signs pressed by human hands. The city remembered as humanity's final station remains quiet within the mound, not lost entirely, yet never restored in full. Archaeologists identified Tel Farah as ancient Shuruppak through written evidence recovered from the site and through the city's place within Mesopotamian geography. Excavations revealed a substantial settlement whose life flourished during the early urban centuries of southern Mesopotamia. Administrative tablets emerged from its soil, preserving the practical pulse of people who distributed rations, managed goods, trained scribes, and organized labor beneath institutions larger than any single household. The discovery carries a gentle correction. Shuruppak was not only a doomed city within a flood story, it was an actual community where people kept records because tomorrow mattered to them. They preserved grain because families needed food. They trained scribes because memory required skill. They marked ownership because human beings have always experienced a special devotion toward knowing which jar, basket, field, or troublesome donkey belonged to whom. The city of the last generation was once simply alive. You descend into an imagined trench, where walls appear as faint lines of compacted mud brick. A doorway emerges, then part of a room. Its floor is uneven and dusty. Nothing inside announces the identity of those who lived there. No household voice remains to explain which corner held bedding, which jar was precious, which child was repeatedly told not to disturb the fresh plaster. Yet the room feels close. A person once leaned against that wall while tired. Someone once sat upon that floor preparing food. A quarrel may have passed through the doorway, followed later by an apology, or by the ancient and equally durable custom of pretending the quarrel never happened. Ordinary life leaves fewer inscriptions than kingship, but it fills the silence more completely. Among the most powerful remains are the tablets. Clay can preserve what cloth, wood, and spoken memory cannot. Tablet hardened by accident, fire, or simple dryness may carry lists and lessons into an age unimaginably distant from the person holding the stylus. In Shuruppak, writing turns out to be a second vessel. It carries the city's voice across a flood of time, though only in pieces, and never with every answer desired. A tablet may name grain, another may preserve instruction. A literary copy may speak of cities founded beneath divine authority, then move toward the destruction of human seed and the exceptional rescue of one attentive ruler. Together, these records do not provide a hidden confession beneath history. They offer something quieter, the meeting point of a real settlement, and a story its descendants could not allow to vanish. This is where the phrase last generation begins to deepen. It need not mean that every living person upon earth stood inside Shurupak's lanes. Ancient stories often gather the whole human condition into one chosen place. A city becomes the world in miniature. Its households become humanity. Its ruler becomes the listening figure through whom survival is imagined. Its disaster becomes the boundary between a first order of things and the uncertain order inherited by later generations. Perhaps the last generation was remembered there because Shuruppak suffered a flood of exceptional force. Perhaps the city already possessed prestige as a center of wisdom, administration, and sacred identity, making it a fitting stage for an ending. Perhaps several memories entered one narrative, joined by scribes who understood that the most powerful stories are rarely inventions without roots. They grow around places where something real once hurt. The earth preserves evidence of water, the tablets preserve meaning. Between them lies the mystery. A curious modern habit has placed further shadows over the mound. Some visitors to ancient stories search for sealed chambers beneath ruined cities, imagining vaults filled with forgotten teachings, star maps, or records of a vanished population hidden from later humanity. Shurupak is especially tempting because its literary role feels like a locked door. A final city ought, somehow, to contain a final secret. But the mound does not need a concealed chamber to be unsettling. Its secret is already present in the exposed walls. Human beings built a stable world upon unstable ground. They trusted fields, institutions, divine patrons, instructions from elders, and the return of ordinary seasons. Then water entered their memory with such force that the city became inseparable from the possibility that order itself can disappear. Scholars continue to disagree about the precise relationship between Shurupak's flood deposits and the traditions later written around the city. No excavation can recover the exact evening when local catastrophe became sacred history. No surviving tablet permits complete certainty about the earliest shape of the tale. Archaeology can place walls, layers, vessels, and texts beneath careful study. It cannot fully recover the fear passing through a family as water rose outside its doorway. You stand upon the mound as the sun begins lowering toward the western plain. There is no roaring flood around you now, only wind, distant cultivation, a pale road, and the faint crunch of ceramic fragments beneath careful footsteps. The city rests quietly under layers of soil, its harbour stilled, its shrine absent from the horizon, its household pressed flat by the passing weight of centuries. Still, Shrupak has not vanished. Its name was written, its stories were copied, its buried rooms were found again. Its surviving lines continue to draw the human mind toward an uncomfortable possibility that people living at the edge of disappearance may not recognize their age as exceptional. They may simply be measuring grain, teaching children, honoring the sacred, repairing walls, and trusting the familiar river beside them. The last generation would not look like a legend to itself. It would look like a city at evening, smoke rising from roofs, reed boats secured at the landing, a tablet drying beside a lamp, a child asleep against a mother's shoulder, a ruler hearing something no one else can hear, a river moving patiently through darkness, close enough to nourish every life, close enough to take every name into its keeping. The mound grows dim beneath the fading sky. You listen for a final answer, but the ancient city offers none. It only remains where it was supposed to stand, upon the low river plain of southern Mesopotamia, under the dust of Tel Farah, holding the memory of a world that believed it was secure until water taught it otherwise. The light is softer now, and the wind no longer carries the weight of questions. You let the ancient mound recede into the quiet distance, until its broken walls become only gentle shapes beneath the stars. The river is calm again within your thoughts. It moves without threat, silver beneath the moon, passing reeds that lean peacefully toward its surface. No one asks you to solve what cannot be solved tonight. The tablets may rest in their cases, their signs still and patient. The buried doorways may remain closed beneath the earth. Shurupak has given what it can give a name, a place, a handful of voices, and the quiet image of human lives gathered near water under an immeasurable sky. Perhaps that is enough for this hour. You do not need to carry the flood with you. You may leave it upon the plain, where the old story has held it for thousands of years. You may leave the king beside his wall, the scribe beside his lamp, the mother beside her sleeping child, and the boat rocking gently upon waters already beginning to grow still. The night does not demand certainty. It offers distance, breath, and rest. Far below the stars, clay tablets sleep without speaking. Barley fields move in the imagined breeze. A temple lamp dims slowly in a courtyard that time has carried away. Even the river seems to soften, releasing its secrets into the dark without requiring anyone to follow. And perhaps the city was never entirely forgotten. Perhaps every careful mark in clay was a small refusal to disappear. Perhaps every listener who drifts across its story gives one quiet evening back to those vanished streets. Your breathing settles. The water is calm, The lamps are low, and perhaps the story is not yet complete.